Welcome to Overanalyzing Vlogs, where I think too much about something. Or do I? I want to talk about the word problematic. You might have heard me use it on the show, you might have seen other people use it as well. It first arrived on the academic scene in its current usage in the 60s, and in the past few years it's gotten a lot more usage in the mainstream. If you look at news headlines, since 2005, its usage in those has doubled. And some people are down on it. I've had commenters say that they've tuned out as soon as I've used it, people say that it's a red flag if they hear anyone using it. Problematic just means presenting a problem. And the way most people are using it now, it usually means presenting a social or political problem to do with some issue of fairness or social justice. For instance, someone might say, oh, this politician has very problematic views about X, or they might say, oh, this TV show is problematic in the way that it talks about this subject. But I've seen people say that it's not specific enough, that if something is racist, you should call it racist. If it's sexist, you should call it sexist. And you shouldn't just hide behind a vague word. They say that problematic is just a smokescreen that people throw up so they don't actually have to back up what they're saying. Well, the word problematic is a shorthand, and like a lot of shorthands and umbrella terms, it can appear to lack detail. But I still think it is a useful word, because often issues of race and gender and sexuality and class and so on are bound up together in complex ways that just using a word like racism or sexism wouldn't quite capture. For instance, if we were to talk about the position of women in society, we would be missing something out if we didn't note that the experience of white women is somewhat different from the experience of black women, and the experience of cis women is somewhat different from the experience of trans women, and the experience of able-bodied women is somewhat different from the experience of women with disabilities, and so on. There are often very complex interconnections between these different isms, and there will be groups of people who fit into multiple categories, again, who have their own unique experiences. So using an umbrella term rather than just one specific term is a way, I think, of capturing that complexity. In a similar vein, some academics are now moving away from using the word patriarchy and instead using the word kyriarchy. The idea is that patriarchy is a system that revolves around men, yes, okay, but if you are a white man, you will have a somewhat different experience than if you are a black man, and the levels of power and privilege that you might be able to enjoy will be somewhat different depending on the different groups that you're in. And kyriarchy is supposed to be a word that captures that complexity and that nuance a little better. I think problematic can be a useful introductory term as well, because often words like sexism and racism have more complex academic and sociological meanings than a lot of people sometimes realise. For instance, you might have heard people say that you can't be sexist against men. And at first glance, when you first see that sentence, it can look pretty ridiculous. It's only when you get into the nitty-gritty and the academic theory and the historical power dynamics that you realise that words like that actually have quite specific meanings that sometimes are lost in common conversation. The dictionary is yet to catch up with those usages before anyone throws a dictionary at me as well. So I think that using a word like problematic, you say, this presents a problem, and you can then go on to say why it presents a problem. Whereas if you have to open with a whole load of stuff about linguistics and academia, then no one's going to read on and read the rest of what you have to say. I think problematic is a useful term, and I think I'm going to keep using it where I think that it's appropriate. But maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Or am I?